Hi, I'm J. Lenora Bressler, and welcome to the 12-12-17 edition of the Bible Delight in the Details. This is the second of a two-part series on Acts chapter 14. We were talking a couple days ago about this interesting little history that happened on the first missionary journey of Paul. He was with Barnabas, and they stopped in a city named Lystra, where they healed a man who had been lame from birth. Now, we talked about that in the first part of our lesson, but now I want to turn to the second part of chapter 14. What happened in the aftermath of that great miracle and that great healing? The people thought that Barnabas and Paul were Zeus and Mercury, and the messenger, the Teleflora guy, and tried desperately to worship them. In fact, we're told that a priest from the nearby Temple of Zeus, where you can actually go and see the ruins to this day of that temple, and you can see inscriptions that talk about a priest of Zeus. He came running with bowls and offerings, wreaths, and that kind of thing. In fact, it says that Barnabas and Paul barely got them to stop because they ripped their clothes, which was a sign of horror, and also just got in the middle of them and said, "Why are you worshiping us? We're men just like you," and then tried to remind them that this great miracle was a sign of the one true God, not a man, and not them, certainly. And when I was teaching this on Sunday in my Sunday school class, I talked to the folks about this. The great St. Augustine, who, he had a few things wrong, but, he had a lot of things right too. One of the things he certainly got right was that he said there is a void in the human heart that is not at rest, at peace. It's not at whole until it finds its rest in God. And I posed this question to folks, and that in my class, and that's this. When you think about that, we do seem, mankind, men and women, we just seem built to be obsessed with something. Have you noticed that? It's not just an obsessive compulsive disorder. We're all like that to some extent. Think about maybe yourself or friends who are they're almost rabid about sports. And if anybody gives them a chance, they jump in, they leap in and start talking about how great their team is. Or what about someone who is very obsessed with politics? And the minute they hear their side challenged, or what they think is possibly a misperception about their party or their candidate, they hurry to correct that misperception. Think about hobbies that people have, and they're so passionate about them. They spend lots of money on going to events where they can be with people who share that obsession almost. They love being around people who are just as committed to those things as they are. They just revel in it. They will spend money and time and effort. They love to dig deep into the knowledge base of that. They'll spend hours and hours in study learning the intricacies of whatever it is that they are obsessing about. Mankind is built to worship something or somebody, and we are going to do it. We're going to worship in the sense of, if you think about it, in the New Testament, we as Christians are told how we're supposed to act toward God, and it is exactly with that kind of obsession. I mean, it's exactly like I've just described. When people give you any opening, we should talk about God. When we hear God misinterpreted, misexplained, misunderstood, we should step in and speak up and explain what the truth is. We should want to dive deep. We should love to spend time in the Word. We should frankly love being with the people of God, people who share our views and our interests. The obsession almost that you see just constantly in people is they're trying to make up for in their heart, as St. Augustine wisely said, they're trying to fill a hole in the heart that has been shaped for God. And of course, here's another interesting thing that we pick up from Acts 14. You see how quickly people wanted to worship. They just wanted to worship these men. Now, interestingly, why did they jump to the conclusion that Barnabas and Paul were Zeus and Mercury? It's because there was a myth that right outside of Lystra, years and years before this, those two Greek gods had actually shown up in disguise and had gone around, and people had mistreated them. And it wasn't until a poor elderly couple, not realizing that they were allegedly gods, but were they were disguised as poor men, treated them well. And of course, the Zeus and Mercury, they gave them blessings and allegedly sent a flood that pretty much wiped out ancient Lystra, and then it had to be rebuilt. So these people went right back to what they knew, what their ancestors had worshipped, and that was this myth of Zeus and Mercury. And then they said, oh, well, they've come again, and they wanted to avoid any of the mistakes that their ancestors had made in dealing with them. Interestingly, when it didn't take but a couple days for the people to turn on these two men that they had wanted to worship as gods. And actually, Barnabas seems to have been removed from the scene. He may have gone on. Paul was left, and they almost killed him. In fact, they thought they had. And they left him outside of the town walls, thinking he was dead. And he was not. There had been some people who had been won over, and they came and got him, and then got him out of town the next day. But this explains something else. Have you ever noticed how quick fads change? And when they do change, people that were all gung-ho and obsessed about something, they poo-poo it and they act like, oh, it's terrible, it was stupid, it was. I mean, they turn on it. They turn on that thing which they themselves were obsessed about as with such a viciousness. And it's almost incredible. It's almost inexplicable until you realize what's really going on here. And that is whether it's a fad or a mode or just what's in right now, we are so compelled to worship. We are looking for that missing piece of ourselves in our hearts, that when a fad runs its course and we are still yearning, we're still longing, we still have that hole in our heart, we are angry about that. We feel disappointed. We feel discouraged. We feel gypped and cheated. And what do? We turn on whatever that fad was, including a person, viciously, because they have let us down. But you know what? No thing and no person can fill that hole in your heart or in mine. It is for God alone. And as Augustine says, we will know no rest until we find our rest in Thee, in Jesus Christ. I'm J. Lenora Bressler. Visit me on the next edition of The Bible. Delight in the Details. Have a great night.